Good morning and welcome to our update on the US-Canada immigration, including an update on the travel ban for international travelers to both destinations. This event is organized by the European American Chamber of Commerce in New York. My name is Yvonne Bendinger-Rothschild. I'm the Executive Director of the EACC, and I will be your host for today's event. To make this program interactive, we encourage our audience to ask questions throughout the program, and I will send them to the speakers. Speaking of our speakers, the panel includes Carrie Koski. She's a shareholder at Ogletree Deakins, Nash, Smoke and Stewart. She partners with clients to create and implement strategic and innovative workforce immigration solutions. Her work involves counseling organizations on all sizes, workforce immigration changes, including corporate reorganization, ramping up, reduction in force, and most importantly, she handles clients' immigration programs, including business travel and work authorization. We also have from Canada, Francis Torini. She's a partner at Axio Attorneys. Before joining Axio, he worked as one of the leading business immigration firms in Hong Kong. There, he helped hundreds of individuals migrate to Canada and the United States. Working for one of the most important immigration law firms in Canada, he then assisted many companies to regularize the status of their foreign workers, which has, as we all know, been a major problem over the last couple of I want to say 4 years almost. Let's get right into the conversation. Carrie, do you want to start us off on a broad overview of where we stand, travel ban, broadly where we are with business immigration?
Sure. Yes. Thank you so much, Yvonne. And thanks to the European American Chamber of Commerce in New York. I'm delighted to be here today. And as Yvonne said, I'm a shareholder at Ogletree Deakins, which is a large labor and employment law firm with an immigration practice. Just to provide some context, the last 20 months have been extremely challenging. And when I look back, I've been doing this for about 20 years. And when I first started, it was the aftermath of September 11th, and we saw the elimination of INS, the creation of Department of Homeland Security, special registration, extremely challenging times. And then in 2008, the global financial crisis hit. And companies came into scrutiny for employment-based immigration. We saw mass layoffs. We saw a drastic drop in demand for H1b visas. Those two events negatively impacted or were challenges with employment-based immigration and business travel. But then in 2016, we saw the prior administration take office and introduce the most restrictive immigration policies in recent history. One way to put it is, to add insult to injury, when COVID-19 hit in 2020, we really, in the United States, we saw our immigration system buckle, and it's buckling. That said, I'm really excited to be here today because I think we do see a light at the end of the tunnel. We have a new travel policy, which is the effective end of the travel ban being implemented on Monday, November 8th, this Monday. And so we seem to be emerging from some of that tight COVID-19 restrictive environment. That said, I'm also going to talk about visa issuance delays, consular processing, remote work compliance steps, and then immigration policy under this current administration and what we expect beyond. Now, that's on the U.S. side. I'm going to turn it over to Francis to talk a little bit about Canadian-bound travel and immigration. And he and I are really going to have sort of a conversation and go back and forth during this webinar. So I'll hand it over to Francis to cover the next slide.
Great. Thank you, Yvonne. Thank you, Carrie. I'm very pleased to be here today. So as Yvonne said, my name is Francis Torini. I'm one of the co-founder of Axio Attorneys. We are a boutique law firm specialized in business immigration, mostly to Canada. So I'm very pleased to be here today because I think we do need to give an update about Canada. The situation evolved a lot during the past 20 months. Canada used to be this very, very open, very gentle country with immigration. And it's still the case, but there are many challenges. We are very strict with COVID-19 situation, as you will see. And the situation evolved a lot. So just to give you maybe a little context, in Canada, the border closed on March 18, 2020. And since then, even in March, during this time, quarantine was absolutely mandatory for everyone, even for Canadian citizens. But now the situation changed a bit in the past few months. So since August 9, people from the US can actually come to Canada, but the land border is still closed until November 8th. So November 8th, it will open. But since August 9, people from the US can actually come to Canada. And since September 7, travelers from all over the world are also allowed to come to Canada for non-discretionary travels. However, there are conditions. All travelers entering in Canada actually need to be fully vaccinated. There are a few exceptions we will see a little later. But the general rule is that everyone needs to be vaccinated. And also, this is not on the PowerPoint, but I want to add that just to tell you how Canada can be strict. Since October 30th, all unvaccinated travelers of 12 years and older are not allowed to board a flight in Canada. So they cannot even go outside the country if they're not vaccinated. Canada is being very aggressive. However, there's an extension granted until November 29 for travelers who can show a negative PCR result. So not a speed test, antigen speed test, but a PCR test result. And also there's another exception. All non-residents will benefit from an exemption to leave the country until February 28, 2022. But this does not apply to Canadian residents and citizens. So Canada is being very aggressive to get people vaccinated, much more aggressive than in the US, if I'm not mistaken. Ivan, we don't hear you.
That's really interesting. That is quite a restrictive measurement. You can't get onto a flight if you're not vaccinated.
Yes.
Wow.
That's a policy they found to force people to get vaccinated.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. Carrie, what's the situation? Give us some of the details on the travel ban that is going to be lifted, or the difference that it's going to make come Monday.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think we're moving toward a more similar approach to Canada. Right now, we have regional restrictions. And if we could just advance the slide, I want to sort of demonstrate this with an anecdote or a story, a recent experience that I had with a client. It's with Tobias, who's a talented German engineer, and he designed this piece of equipment which is being launched by the U.S. affiliate. And the company actually needed him to come to the United States in October, early October. They reached out, I think it was September 25th, and said, Carrie, hey, we need this guy here on October 10th for a business meeting. And I said, whoa, there is a Schengen area ban, and you can't travel the United States as a visitor unless you have a national interest exception. And national interest exceptions, which are still required until Monday, are granted in the discretion of the U.S. Department of State and the U.S. visa officers, which are staffing consular posts globally. And so we submitted the national interest exception, and I actually was not optimistic. I didn't think we'd get it in time for him to board that flight on October 10th, but because the piece of equipment that he designed is used in drilling, mineral drilling, it contributes to the critical infrastructure, which is a requirement for a national interest exception permission. And we got that, what we call NIE, national interest exception, within just a few days. And he came to the United States on October 10th, for his business meeting. And at the same time, the company initiated an intercompany transfer visa, an L1 visa, because the goal is for him to be here long term in early 2022, in January 2022. So he's now returned to his home in Germany, and we're preparing this application for him. And when he gets here is going to be dictated by when he's able to appear for that visa appointment in Munich, Berlin, or Frankfurt. And you know, this has all been impacted by COVID-19 because back in, and I'll talk a little bit about this more in a minute, but there's skeletal staff at U.S. consulates overseas. And so we're not seeing routine visa processing, and there are extensive delays. So while we can prepare his visa application, you know, within a matter of weeks, it may take him months to schedule an appointment at the U.S. consulate, one of the U.S. consulates in Germany. Now, he plans to bring his entire family to the United States. And so he has children who may not be vaccinated yet because there's not a global pediatric vaccine. And so the United States, after Monday, will allow non-immigrant travelers to come to the United States. So when Tobias gets his L, he will no longer need travel permission if he's fully vaccinated. And his spouse can come if she's fully vaccinated on L2. And his children can travel the United States under the exception. Children under 18 are not required to be vaccinated, given this rule, which I'll talk about more in a minute. And children under 2 actually don't even need to be tested. So he can have peace of mind that he'll get his entire family to the United States as long as him and his spouse are vaccinated and his children are accepted. Now, again, timing depends on when he's able to schedule that appointment, that visa appointment in Germany. And again, there are extensive delays. So if we can move to the next slide, let's talk about status quo, where we are today. Where we are today, we have these regional travel restrictions where the United States has said, if you've been in these certain countries in the past 14 days, you're prohibited from entering the United States. And this started in January of 2020 with China. And the idea in the prior administration, obviously to protect the United States from COVID-19. So China was the first on the list in January, and then the Schengen area, UK and Ireland were added in April. And then subsequently, additional countries have been added, you know, Iran, India, Brazil, South Africa. I might be missing one there, but so this is a regional focus because these countries, these areas have been hotspots for COVID-19. Obviously, there are others, but the Biden administration has now reviewed this, and come Monday, it will take not a regional approach, but will take an umbrella approach. So if we could go to the next slide. Generally, fully vaccinated people, just like Canada, will be permitted to enter the United States from anywhere. So we no longer have these regional restrictions. We no longer need national interest exception permission. People can come and go if they're fully vaccinated. We do anticipate that this will open the floodgates of business travelers. You know, those people that had business meetings scheduled in April of 2020 can finally go to those meetings in December of 2021 if there's still a need. Obviously, we've all moved to virtual meetings, but you know, we anticipate that, and we hope that airlines are preparing for a flood of business traveler for fully vaccinated people. So these travelers will need to provide proof of vaccine and documentation of a pre-departure negative test within 3 calendar days of entering the United States. And this again is for vaccinated travelers. There are exceptions, like I mentioned, children and other exceptions that I'll talk about. Unvaccinated travelers will have to provide a test within 1 day, and they'll have to meet one of the exceptions. Not every unvaccinated traveler will be able to enter the United States. There have been questions about which vaccines will be accepted, and the government has said any vaccine accepted by the CDC or the World Health Organization. So it's Moderna, it's Johnson & Johnson, it's Pfizer, AstraZeneca, BIPB, and Sinopharm Sinovac. And there may be additional vaccines added. We can talk. Let's go ahead, Yvonne.
Yeah, a question, you know, so I want to see, you know, if Francis has any comments on that. as it relates to Canada. But then I wanted, go back to visa. The fact that the consular services are still kind of sparse. I wanted to have a quick question about visas. But Francis, you first. Any comments on that, or how that differs in Canada?
Yeah, in Canada, it differs, I think, on two things. First of all, you need to enter Canada with a PCR test result. So like rapid tests are not accepted. So my understanding is that in the US, it's accepted. In Canada, you need to have, the PCR test result, which is more expensive and a bit more complicated to get. And also the test needs to be taken 72 hours before your arrival to Canada. So even if it's 70 hours, it doesn't work. The custom agent will say, no, you lack 2 hours, you cannot board the flight. We had a client who had that experience. So I think these are probably the two differences. And also in the vaccines included in Canada, the Chinese ones are not accepted. So all the other ones that are listed there are accepted, but not the Chinese ones.
So how if I cross on a land border? If I come to the United States and I cross Canada through the land border, can I do that?
Yes, absolutely. But the rules are the same.
The rules are the same. Okay.
Yeah.
Because the rules were a little bit different when I came on a flight and when I crossed the land border. It was just like really difficult to get a connecting train. I seem to recall what was one of the issues.
But you do need to be fully vaccinated.
Interesting, and no Sinovac.
Yeah.
Fascinating. I'm looking at the next slide. Do you want to? Let's dive into that and wrap this, travel ban up. Paolo, do you want to move to the next slide, because there, it's a summary of all of the exceptions and requirements. Carrie, is there anything that you want to highlight out of those?
Sure. So if somebody is trying to enter based on one of these exceptions, and there are a myriad of exceptions, for example, people who come from countries where there are low vaccine rates may travel to the United States, but they have to make certain attestations. They have to, when they are in the United States, get vaccinated in the United States and follow CDC guidelines. So there are robust requirements for people that are meeting one of these exceptions. I mentioned the 3 days of obtaining a negative COVID test, and I think the requirement, the testing requirement is these folks can get rapid tests, but the tests have to be a viral test, and it has to be authorized for use by the national authority. So they can't be home tests, and they have to be antigen tests. So 3 days in advance for fully vaccinated people, 1 day in advance for people that are unvaccinated. And then again, a test that they'll comply with public health requirements and get vaccinated in the United States if they're here for more than 60 days. And then after entering the United States, folks will have to obtain another negative test within 3 to 5 days, and then also self-quarantine for 7 days. And again, that's if meeting one of these exceptions to being fully vaccinated. And of course, if fully vaccinated people do not need to quarantine and simply need to get a negative test 3 days before coming to the United States.
I have a follow-up question on this. We know of a diplomat who is not vaccinated and doesn't want to get vaccinated. So she cannot travel back to her home country because she won't be able to come back. She will be able to come back, but then how is this enforced? Or is this also, does this rule that you must obtain a vaccination within 60 days of entering the US, does that also hold true for diplomats?
It would. So it's enforced essentially. I mean, airlines, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security is going to be, and it already does, coordinating with airlines to get proof of vaccine or proof of get these attestations that people will get vaccinated. Diplomats are actually becoming under one of the exceptions. So they would have to get a negative COVID test within 1 day, and then a negative COVID test within 3 to 5 days after entering, and then quarantine for 7 days, and then make certain attestations. And the requirements for people entering under these exceptions can also be found at the CDC website. So I would recommend looking at that. I do think that for people entering the United States on behalf of foreign governments, there is additional detail in the rules, and so they should check with their foreign governments and with the CDC.
Wow.
Carrie, are people with like student permits and work permits authorizations are allowed to enter without being fully vaccinated?
No. So the general rule is that everybody needs to be vaccinated.
Okay.
So in order to enter the United States, you will have to show proof of vaccination, a negative COVID test within 3 days, and that 72 hours of entering the United States. And like you said, Francis, it's similar. It cannot be outside of that 72-hour period. And only if people fall into one of these exceptions, that's minors, people under 18, people in the U.S. Armed Forces, although they're federally mandated to be vaccinated. So airline crew members, which I mean, my impression is that would be very rare. People working for foreign governments, so that's diplomats, people who have participated in COVID-19 vaccine trials, and may still be in those trials, people who cannot get vaccinated because they have medical conditions that prevent them from getting vaccinated, people who are entering the United States for humanitarian purposes, for example, Afghan refugees who have not yet been vaccinated, or where vaccines are unavailable in a country of origin. And you know, those last 2 and 3 bullet points, those folks would need to get vaccinated within 60 days if they're in the United States for 60 days. And of course, there are quarantine requirements. And again, this is the exception. The general rule is full vaccination. If you want to enter the United States on Monday or after, you may, as a business traveler or as a student or as a work authorized person with an H1b visa, but you need to be fully vaccinated. And the benefit to this new rule is that you no longer will need to apply for a national interest exception if you're fully vaccinated.
Interesting. So you have another slide about I think we covered that returning vaccinated and what the Paolo, can you move one slide down?
Right. Yeah. And just very quickly, this is for lawful permanent residents and U.S. citizens. So even lawful permanent residents and U.S. citizens are subject to this new policy, this new umbrella policy, and will need to meet these certain requirements: provide proof of vaccine, provide negative COVID test within 1 day if not vaccinated. If you forgot your vaccine card, you'll have to get a negative COVID test within 1 day. And then, of course, again, minors under 18 years of age are not required to be fully vaccinated, and children under 2 years old are not required to get tested.
Yeah, and I just came back from Berlin. We were able to re-enter the United States. I had to bring my physical card, but we were able to re-enter the United States on a rapid test. So that wasn't a problem. They had them in Berlin, like on every street corner, just like New York. Francis, a quick word on Canada for Canadian citizens. Are there any special rules, or do they get any exceptions?
Maybe we can go on the next slide. Maybe we can continue. I think we've covered that, but yeah, these are the vaccines that are accepted. So, different from the United States, the Chinese one is not accepted, but the other ones are accepted. And you can also have 1 dose of each. You can mix the vaccines. And also, very important, it must be 4 full days before your last dose. I don't know if it's the same thing in the US, but so for example, if your last dose was on November 1st, you're allowed to travel on November 16th. So that's very important. Is it the same thing in the US?
I believe it's 2 weeks.
2
You have
weeks.
to you have to receive your last dose within 2 weeks.
Okay.
So there's a longer waiting period
Yeah.
for US.
Okay. Maybe.
And on this, you have a couple of points on this, on the situation in Canada, grief and loss. So you have a death in the family, you can travel. Is there, and we had that in Germany as well, I seem to recall, where if you stayed only for 72 hours and only with direct family members, you were allowed to enter not vaccinated and without quarantining. Is it similar to that in Canada?
Well, we have a bunch of exceptions. It's very weird because the Canadian government doesn't give a specific list. And we also advise our clients to get a pre-authorization from the Canadian authorities before boarding a flight if they think they are part of the exceptions. But it's a bit different from the US. For example, international students are allowed to come in without necessarily being fully vaccinated. People with approved permanent residency also, people who are receiving medical services, people who have also work permits authorization can enter Canada. Family reunification also, this is another one of the exceptions. However, you are obligated to quarantine for 14 days after that, and to provide a test at your negative PCR test result at your 8th day of your quarantine. And
so follow-up question on the work authorization, because there was a major issue, with our new hire. It was a visa extension, but it was an L visa. So L visas were not able to return to the United States if they left the country at a opportune moment. All work permits in Canada can return to Canada?
Yes, all work permits can return to Canada, even if you're not fully vaccinated. But as I said, 14-day quarantine after that. And people think, I will just, I will do a part of the quarantine and not do anything. But they're actually checking very carefully. They come knock at your door. I had someone who came at my door 3 times during my 14-day quarantine to see if I was there. And they do give, very high contravention. So it's very, you need to stay home. Actually, it's very well implemented. So kind of difficult.
Wow.
Yeah.
The Canadians.
No, they do check. Absolutely, and they call you also. Any time of the day, they come knock at your door. It's quite difficult.
Wow, I'm impressed.
Yeah.
We don't have that, Carrie. We don't have that in the U.S. Now, no one knocked on our door. We just
Right. Yeah. Yeah, you make an attestation with the CDC, and you have to check in. The United States has ways to check in virtually, but I just want to make one point that the everything that I'm talking about in terms of the vaccine requirement goes into effect on Monday. So it's not in effect yet. So on Monday, anybody that's fully vaccinated will be able to enter the United States if they're on a work permit, a spouse of a work permit holder, a scholar, a student, somebody traveling on ESTA as a business visitor. If you're fully vaccinated on Monday, you should be able to enter with proof of vaccination. Right now, and you mentioned the L1 person leaving the United States and not being able to come back in, because there are these regional travel restrictions, including for the Schengen area in Europe. They would have needed to apply for a national interest exception and have proven that their work in the United States contributed to the critical infrastructure or the national interest of the United States, which is a very high threshold and not universally monitored or implemented. So we randomly got national interest exceptions and permission for people to travel back to the United States. That's all going away on Monday. That's how it is now. But after Monday, that will not be the situation anymore.
Yeah. So let's move on a little bit down because we covered the entry requirements and what have you. So me as an employer, how is that going to affect my decision making? Because we still haven't, we still are catching up on, or we're still dealing with limited consular services. I don't know if the situation in Frankfurt, for example, improved. I heard that the U.S. consulate in Frankfurt was completely shut down for all visa applications because people were moved to Doha to process refugees. So what am I doing as an employer? You know, I'm never going to apply for an L visa ever again. Because what is my learning, you know, out of this?
Well, I mean, and I think that these are temporary conditions, right? If you could advance to slide 16, if just skip over, actually, you know, Germany is opening back up. Frankfurt was designated as an Afghan refugee processing center. So I think that was temporary, but I checked US consular visa appointment wait times in Berlin, Munich, and Frankfurt this morning, and they're all 7 days or less. I don't know if that's accurate, but it looks like the US consulates in Germany have opened back up for visa processing. If the US Department of State website is accurate for visa wait times. That's not the situation in Paris. I think Paris is at 199 days. London, it's emergency appointments only. And I have to believe the Department of State is providing accurate information on their website. It may not be, but anyway, Frankfurt, Munich, and Berlin, people can apply for visas there now and schedule visas within a week. That's not to say that those visa appointments might not be canceled later on, but cross fingers they won't. I want to share this slide with you. Oh, go ahead, Yvonne.
If I'm a Parisian, can I travel to Berlin and get my visa processed there?
So that's a great question, and the answer is generally no. And the reason is because U.S. consulates are not engaging what we call third country nationals. So in order to apply at a U.S. consulate, you need to be a citizen, a resident, or have other ties and prove that you're justified. Now, some employers have very strong presence in certain cities. And will directly engage the U.S. consulates in those cities and get visa appointments for their employees. But that is sort of outside of the norm and requires the employer and their government relation people to engage the U.S. authorities. So it is possible and it is happening, but generally no. I think that this slide is a good metaphor for what's going on with U.S. consular services because I think this is like a football game or a concert where there are very few security people working. I mean, these people are standing in line for security. That's the impression I get. And it's the same at U.S. consulates. Back in March of 2020, the U.S. Department of State called back its diplomatic staff in order to protect them from COVID-19. And so you have very skeletal staffing of these US consulates. Now, there are very few people there, and they're just not able to process visas in any normal fashion. Yeah. So you know, London is essentially shut down for work visas. Paris is, you know, very, very delayed. US consulates in Asia are delayed. The Nordics, emergency appointments only. And we're just going through this period right now where there's not a lot of predictability. The U.S. Department of State is not training visa officers, meaning they're not getting ready to deploy people back to consulates yet. When we hear news that they are, it'll probably be 3 to 6 months before they're able to restaff those posts and do routine visa services. So it's unpredictable, but we're making it work where we need to make it work, and we're working with employers if they have contacts or presence in the cities in which they want people to apply.
Francis, how is that in Canada?
Yeah, pretty much the same thing in Canada. I mean, the waiting times are much longer than usual. We have monthly calls with the immigration authorities, and they're saying they're working on it, but they need to train. They hired some new staff, I think, thousands of people, but they need to be trained. They also hired, they also rented some additional office spaces, but there's too much demand. So it's longer than usual, but it's improving. It has improved, I'd say, for the past few months. And also the port of entry applications are possible for people coming from the US. So if you're coming from the US, you actually can apply for your work permit directly at the border. So that was not possible before, but now it's possible again since September 7th. So it helps things, of course.
But to pick up on that, so you apply for the work permit at the border. How long does this take?
Takes a few hours. You come with your whole package. You give that to the immigration officer. You go to the small room, and then they will interview you. They will check if your application is okay, and they will actually issue the work permit in front of you right now. So it takes a few hours.
Francis,
so of course it helps.
Just U.S. citizens? Is that for everybody? Can anybody apply at the U.S. border?
It's for everyone that spent at least 14 days in the U.S.
Great.
Yeah.
Wow.
And they are more and more countries that will be allowed again. Visa exempt countries, for example, people coming from France, it will be allowed again soon, they're saying. But now we still need to go to the consulate in Paris.
Wow, that's amazing. I have to say,
it helps a lot.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Which explains a trend that had started during the previous administration, where instead of sending people before COVID, instead of sending people, or when H1bs and other visas were kind of all of a sudden like unattainable, I saw a lot of activity in Canada, people setting up satellite offices in Canada, instead of going to the US, and then have literally people drive in through Buffalo, for their either work remotely in Canada or drive in every morning to New York to work and drive back in the evening. Fascinating. So with that, business visas, what's new on that end?
Well, I can give a little bit of an update. The visa exempt countries for business travel, the people who use ESTA or the visa waiver program, and including Canadians, all European countries are part of the visa waiver program. On Monday, it's going to be a free-for-all because as long as folks are vaccinated, they can use ESTA now without getting permission from the U.S. consulate based on national interest exception. So I think we're going to see a wave of business travel, people coming to the United States to attend business meetings, to do their market research, to attend board meetings. There's going to be a lot more face-to-face, masked, but face-to-face business being done. B visas, so for folks that need B visas, and generally that it doesn't apply to Europeans because they're visa exempt, but people that need B visas, same challenges with the scheduling visa appointments overseas. So my recommendation would be to use ESTA or the visa waiver program if you can, and come Monday you will be able to if you're vaccinated.
But then there are restrictions on what you can do in the United States.
Right.
I always warn visitors that we have who say, I'm going to stay here for 6 months, work from here, and I'm like, ooh, wait a second. Can you just talk about them real quick, because it comes up all the time?
Sure. Yes. So ESTA or the B visa, they're not work authorized visas. So they allow people to come into the United States to do limited business activities. And there's really a very good sort of 3-question test. The first question is, are you being paid by a US company? If the answer is yes, you need a work authorized visa and you cannot travel as a business visitor. The second question is, are you performing services that are benefiting a U.S. company? So are you doing implementation for a U.S. company that is benefiting that U.S. company? Or are your services flowing to the benefit of like a U.S. affiliate? If the answer is yes, then you need a visa and you can't travel using ESTA or a B visa. The third question is, are you performing services or producing goods that a U.S. worker could do? Are you a software developer coming in and coding? If the answer is yes, you need a visa. So it's a 3-question test. It's pretty simple, but people can come to the United States if they're attending business meetings, if they're gathering requirements. So people are coming to meet, to analyze, to look at equipment, to look at systems, and to gather specifications and requirements, and then to go back to their home country to actually do the work. That's perfectly acceptable, and it always has been using ESTA. Negotiating contracts, doing sales activities, limited sales activities is permissible. So a lot of business activity actually can be done. Coming to the United States to start, to think about expanding here, to meet with partners to expand business here, that can all be done using ESTA or a B visa. But it is a great question, and honestly, there are a myriad of requirements and conditions that we look at, and it's a case-by-case basis. But it is exciting because, like I said, I know my clients have folks that have been waiting to come to the United States for 20 months, and they certainly will be traveling more come Monday.
Yeah, and the rules for business travelers are really the same in Canada, actually. As long as you don't enter to Canada for more than 6 months and you don't enter the labor market, and your source of income is outside Canada, you can come as a business traveler. There's a lot of people in gray areas. We always suggest to come with a package to explain to the immigration officer what you're really doing in Canada. Very important to have a return plane ticket, maybe a schedule of your meetings, things like that. And a lot of immigration officers will go see also on LinkedIn to make sure that what you're saying is true. So if you're in a gray area, it's always better to come with documentation at the border to make sure the border officer don't ask for a work permit.
Yeah, definitely. We have a question from the audience. Most non-immigrant visa applicants denied for NIEs have been in administrative processing at U.S. embassies since 2020. Do you have any insights on how quickly embassies will adjudicate those visa applications after November 9th?
Sure. So, so national interest exception permission to travel is different from an administrative processing. National interest exception is for people who may be applying for visas or already have them and simply need permission to enter the United States. And it's not superficial, but it's not as a robust background check or deep analysis as an actual visa application. So if you're applying for a visa for the first time, or maybe you're renewing, there's more compliance that the Department of State needs to do that is not done with the national interest exception. So administrative processing occurs when a person has applied for a visa and the U.S. consular officer needs more information in order to approve that visa or make a decision on the visa. So it's typically that the U.S. consular officer, the U.S. consular officer is saying formally that they don't have enough information, either that the applicant didn't provide it, or there's something in the applicant's history, biographical history, that is triggering a security check. And there are many different types of administrative processing, so it depends on the type. And there's a whole catalog that the Department of State uses. I will say that visa officers sometimes will trigger administrative processing for their own reasons. There's a lot of discretion. And there, for example, different types of administrative processing. For security checks, sometimes people have to provide everywhere they worked and lived for 15 or 20 years. And those types of security checks typically take months and months and months. However, with pressure, for example, I'm engaging on these types of security checks pretty routinely. We've been able to push them through with the Department of State, clearing them up. Sometimes these visa officers have to actually engage the U.S. Consular Services and Department of State in Washington, D.C. And do global security checks through Interpol and other police services. And that can take months and months. Sometimes these administrative processing requests are simply for people who have advanced degrees, who may be doing research in sensitive technologies, and the U.S. Department of Defense and Department of Homeland Security wants to make sure that what they're doing is not invasive to the United States security. So there are just many, many, many different types of security checks. And so without more information, it would be difficult for me to say and to understand or expect when this person's administrative processing is going to conclude. Now, to get back to the point, we do hope that because visa officers are not going to be processing national interest exceptions after
This speeds up.
Sunday, they won't need to look at these anymore. All national interest exceptions for permission to travel are submitted via email or other electronic format. Because visa officers won't be needing to do that, they can reallocate their time and effort and their resources, hopefully, to routine visa processing. And we won't see as many administrative processing triggers. Now, don't quote me on that, but that is what we would hope, that since they don't have to deal with those NIE requests anymore, they can get back to what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, there's a follow-up question to that. So what does that mean? Does that mean that this is just going to be approved, although we haven't figured out if this person really lived in the 15 places over the last 20 years? Or is this going to be shelved and then we talk about it again in 15 months when I have time again?
I would continue to engage and follow up with the U.S. consulate because this is if it's that kind of biographical deep dive, it's a security check. It's security, and it's serious. And so definitely continue to follow up with that consulate and see if they need additional information. Be very generous about providing information and try and get down to the bottom line of what that consulate is needing.
Yeah, and we have another question from the audience. What's the current wait time for an L1 visa, roughly?
It depends on the consulate where they're applying. So and it depends on the type. So L1 visas, there are blanket applications that are done directly at the U.S. consulate overseas, and so that's always based on the post. So in London, emergency appointments only. In Munich, I think it's a 3-day wait, right? If the petition if it's an individual petition and not an umbrella or blanket application, the petition has to be submitted with the Department of Homeland Security in the United States, which typically will add 2 to 3 months to the total timeline.
Interesting, because that could be a problem for Tobias's wife. I'm sure she wants to work, when they get to the United States, depending on how young the kids are. So you better be starting her L1, no?
Right. Well, she would be entitled to the L2 with Tobias. If Tobias gets the L1, she's entitled to the L2, and it's processed. Let's say, Frankfurt and Munich, there are visa appointments available next week. Let's say they go in next week, they get the L1, they get the L2, everything for the kids. They enter the United States, let's say on December 1st. She then actually has to apply for a work permit, an EAD. And there are excessive backlogs, unfortunately. This administration said that they were going to eliminate those backlogs by eliminating biometrics for EADs. And we thought we were going to see great results, and we haven't yet. And frankly, it's disappointing. I thought that we were going to go back to 75, 90-day processing of EADs, and we're still at 9, 10, 11, 12 months. So it's just, it's a challenge.
Tell me
It's
about
a
it.
challenge in Canada too. I mean, you can't tell the client exactly when they will get their work permit. It changes all the time from one country to the other. In Paris, for example, one day you can have a 2-week processing time. The other day you can have 3 months. It changes all the time. And the reality is that, immigration officers have a lot of discretion, so they can take their time on one application if they want to ask more questions. So that's the reality.
Yeah, it makes it just really extremely difficult for the employer. I mean,
Yes.
it's exactly the situation that we were in. It's just you don't know when the person can actually start, and then you're hopping month to month to month, trying to figure out, do you need other help? How can you do it? A very not conducive to business. I can tell you that much. We have a few minutes left, 8 to be exact. Talk to us, both of you, a little bit about work, remote work, and compliance with U.S. and with Canadian immigration.
This is a very serious issue in the United States, particularly for H1b visa holders, because if compliance steps aren't taken, it can have extreme consequences. I don't know if you can advance to slide 19. Essentially, if there's an H1b visa holder that is working remotely, and we're all working from home in sub capacity, there are, I think it's the one before that, slide 19, yeah. There are really two different compliance sort of regimes or programs. And to explain this and to demonstrate this, let's say there's an H1b visa holder whose office is in Manhattan, and before COVID, they were just commuting from Jersey City to Manhattan every day. And now they're working at home in Jersey City. So all they need to do is put an LCA posting up, and then have their employer update what we call a public access file. It's a Department of Labor file connected to the H1B, and they're compliant, okay?
Right.
Let's say they move to the Hamptons. They're sick of Jersey City, they can set up in the Hamptons. They go to the Hamptons. Still, the Hamptons is actually considered New York Metro from the Department of Labor point of view. And so all they have to do is post their LCA notice another time and then update the public access file again. But let's say they get sick of that, and now they want to move upstate, up the Hudson River Valley. So they want to move to Kingston. Well, this is not in the same metro area, and it's not even in the same commuting distance. It's 100 miles away, and it takes hours to get there. So an H1b amendment would be required, which is a heavier lift. It's a new petition to the Department of Homeland Security, showing the wage levels, the occupation. But the good thing is that once that amendment is filed, the company is compliant and the employee is compliant. Now, the consequences of not doing this are extreme. We had a person who we filed an H1B transfer for to come on board to a company, and their prior employer had not filed an amendment. In the petition, they said the person was working in Philadelphia, but the person had actually moved to California. And Department of Homeland Security said, nope, we'll approve this H1B, but this person's not been maintaining status. The person had to then take the H1B approval, leave the United States, go to India and apply for a visa. And the US consulate in India said, nope, there's misrepresentation. You're permanently barred from the United States, forever applying for a green card. And the person can apply for a waiver to try and come back in H1B status. But it's an extreme and drastic result of the prior employer not filing an amendment. So if you have an H1B, and this is specific to H1Bs, make sure that you're following compliance steps by either getting that posting up, that LCA posting up, or by filing an H1B amendment. If ever in doubt, just file an H1B amendment. Now, these work remote location-specific compliance requirements do not apply to L1 visas. They don't apply to O1 visas. They don't apply to TN visas, and they don't apply to EAD cards or work permits. So there's more flexibility there. Obviously, you always want to update your immigration lawyer if you're in one of these statuses and you're moving, just to make sure that there aren't any additional compliance steps. So, H1Bs, just be careful.
Francis, any
Yeah, I'd
peculiarities?
say it's probably the one thing that Canada is maybe a bit more flexible on that. There's two situations, right? If someone has a close work permit with an employer in a specific province in Canada, for example, in Quebec, and wants to work from another province, for example, in British Columbia, they need to advise Service Canada. They need to advise immigration authorities that they're not working from the same place they were telling in the application. And the other situation is a foreigner that would come with his laptop as a visitor and work remotely within Canada. So that's allowed as long as the person is here, I'd say less than 6 months, and also his source of income is outside Canada. But as soon as Canada becomes your main place of residence, then the immigration authorities will ask for a work permit. So we've had some situations which, for example, spouses of people who came with a work permit, the spouses didn't necessarily ask for a work permit. They were working from home, but as the main person made is Canada his main residence, the immigration authorities told the wife, you need to get a work permit because now Canada is your main residence. So it's a bit more flexible, but we need to be very careful too.
Yeah, I guess depends on the marriage, but yeah, very tricky. I mean, I remember when I had an H1b, we had the posting requirement. I remember that vividly, but there weren't as many checks on them way back when. And I heard that checks of Homeland Security officers have become rampant on this. Do you want to talk? Is that an issue, or are there any changes to that, or?
It's expected to come into play much more. There's a big effort. I think it's being implemented next week, sort of in tandem with the vaccine requirement, sort of to clamp down on misuse. And it's the Department of Homeland Security Fraud and Detection Unit, and they're doing a lot of these investigations via email. So if you're an employer and you get an email and they're asking questions about the H1B, take it seriously. I mean, sometimes it's spam. I mean, there's lots of shams and fraud out there with people trying to scare H1B holders and employers that use H1B, but take it seriously and connect with your immigration attorney and reach out, because you want to reply and respond to those requests. You want to act in good faith. If there are compliance requirements, you need to get on top of that, make sure that you're compliant. So you're not within the crosshairs of the Department of Homeland Security, which could snowball into something bad.
Yeah, we already talked about the Canadians checking up on you. Does that hold true for visas and visa holders?
Yes.
Right. Go ahead.
Yeah. So look ahead really quickly. What to expect, for 2022, and in general, how is immigration different than what it used to be?
So with the United States, my primary point would be that the Biden administration is immigrant friendly. And, like I said, the prior administration had the most restrictive immigration policies in recent history. This administration is immigrant friendly, so we are seeing more flexibility, but that's different from being employment-based immigration friendly. So the meaning is that this administration's priority is immigration, but it's mostly, the Afghan refugee crisis, DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, the crisis at the border, focusing on humanitarian immigration issues. But we are seeing some more flexibility in the employment-based front. The supercharged public charge rule is gone, so you don't have to submit your credit report or 10 years of financials if you're applying for a green card. Scrutiny is not as extreme. Buy American, Hire American's gone, but this administration is protecting our U.S. workforce, but we don't have the extreme vetting. We don't have the anti-immigrant approach under Buy American, Hire American. EAD cards, still a problem, but biometrics are gone, which is good. We have the prior deference policy. So if you had an L1 visa, chances are your renewal is going to get approved without an RFE. And that is a delightful news to us because we were really tied up with requests for evidence in the past. We're just not seeing them anymore. We're seeing more engagement from USCIS. We had a bunch of green cards filed last October, and we're seeing retrogressions, so those cases will continue to pen. There's a lot more, but I'm going to hand it over to Francis because I know we're at time.
Yeah, no, it's the same thing in Canada. I mean, of course, we're immigrant friendly, but I'd say it's more strict than it used to be. Definitely, you know, your file needs to be, you know, very thorough, very, you know, kind of perfect. You know, immigration officers sometimes we had the equivalent of the request for evidence also in Canada, and they can ask for a lot of additional documents. So we need to be very careful about that. But still, I mean, we have you know, we have this fast process work permits for people who work on startups and technological companies. So it's very interesting also.
Yeah, very good, very interesting. And I encourage you know, everybody to follow up. We will be sending out a handout with more details and background on the topics that we discussed. And I always say, never try to do this by yourself. Always hire an immigration attorney. And also, you don't want to be in a situation where you're permanently banned for entering the United States. Geez, imagine that. And the really fascinating topic, and which has been a major hindrance in transatlantic trade. You know, first with you know, H1b visas not being issued, EADs being delayed, and then the travel ban. I mean, the travel ban was the bane of my existence for the longest time. But with that, we are out of time. If you have questions, additional questions, you can contact our panelists from today's program. And with that, we conclude the webinar. Thank you, Francis and Carrie, for
My pleasure.
For your insights and expertise on this. Thank you. We have a couple other programs scheduled for the next couple of months. One, Europe post-Merkel, on November 9th. We have a quarterly economic update on the European Union on November 17. And then also very interesting, a discussion about transatlantic collaboration on EV batteries on December 6th, and a real estate update on the 9th of December. So more programs to come. On our end, check in with us. We will send a list of attendees around after the event. And if you're a member of the EACC, we're happy to connect you with the other attendees. With that, thank you and have a wonderful day.